The View studio was already tense before the cameras turned on. Not chaotic, not loud, just tense in the way that happens when everyone in the room knows something might go wrong, and no one's sure who will pull the trigger. Denzel Washington was scheduled to appear on the panel to discuss his upcoming directorial project, a film exploring faith and redemption in modern America. It had been pitched as a thoughtful conversation about spirituality and cinema, the role of belief in overcoming adversity, and his personal journey as both an artist and a man of faith. But that was just the version the public saw. Behind the scenes, there were emails, conditions, and warnings. Denzel's team had been very specific about keeping the conversation focused on his artistic vision and the positive message of his latest work. The View's producers had agreed, or at least they said they had. But just minutes before they walked onto the set, one of the producers whispered something to Behar about challenging his religious views and not letting him preach to the audience. And Joy's entire approach shifted. The atmosphere in the studio carried an undercurrent of expectation mixed with apprehension. The crew moved with unusual precision, knowing they were about to host one of Hollywood's most respected figures. The lighting had been adjusted to capture every nuance of expression, every moment of what could become either a masterful interview or a complete disaster. When Denzel finally stepped onto the stage, the applause was immediate and overwhelming. The audience knew they were witnessing something special, arguably the greatest actor of his generation, a man whose very presence commanded respect across all demographics and political lines. Denzel wore an elegant navy suit that perfectly complemented his distinguished silver hair, his bearing radiating the kind of quiet confidence that comes from decades of excellence. He smiled warmly at the audience, his trademark humility evident in every gesture. Whoopi started with the reverence that Denzel's stature demanded. She said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have the incredible honor of hosting the legendary Denzel Washington. Denzel, welcome back to The View. It's always a privilege to have you here." Denzel's smile was genuine, his voice carrying that distinctive warmth that had captivated audiences for 40 years. He said, "Thank you, Whoopi. It's always wonderful to be here. I appreciate you having me on to discuss this project that's very close to my heart." Sarah Haynes leaned forward with obvious enthusiasm. She said, "Denzel, this new film deals with some profound themes about faith and second chances. What inspired you to tackle these subjects as a director?" Denzel's eyes lit up with passion as he moved into territory where he felt completely comfortable. He said, "You know, Sarah, I've always been fascinated by stories of transformation. This film explores how faith, whether in God, in yourself, or in the possibility of change, can literally save lives. It's about hope in hopeless situations." His voice carried the weight of personal conviction as he continued. "I've seen it in my own life, in my community, in the people I've worked with over the years. When everything else fails, sometimes faith is all you have left. And sometimes that's enough." Alyssa Farah Griffin nodded thoughtfully. She said, "The film has been described as deeply spiritual. How do you balance creating art that speaks to believers while still appealing to broader audiences?" Denzel considered the question carefully, his response revealing the depth of thought he'd put into the project. He said, "I think universal themes transcend religious boundaries. Love, forgiveness, redemption, hope. These aren't exclusively Christian concepts. They're human concepts. My faith informs my perspective, but the emotions and struggles we explore are things everyone can relate to." For about 20 minutes, the conversation flowed beautifully. Denzel discussed his research process, working with faith communities, and the challenge of creating authentic spiritual content in a secular industry. The audience was captivated, drawn in by his sincerity and the obvious passion he brought to discussing his work. He shared a particularly moving story about meeting a former gang member who had found purpose through faith-based rehabilitation. This man had been written off by society, by his own family. But he found something bigger than himself to believe in, and it completely transformed his life. That's the kind of story I want to tell. Then Joy Behar decided to shift gears completely. She said, Denzel, that's all very inspiring, but let's be honest here. Religion has been used to justify a lot of terrible things throughout history. Don't you worry about promoting faith when it's been the source of so much division and hatred. A subtle change occurred in Denzel's demeanor. His smile remained, but something shifted behind his eyes. He said carefully, Joy, I think that's true of any powerful force in human society. People have used politics, nationalism, even science to justify terrible things. That doesn't mean faith itself is the problem. Joy pressed forward, her tone becoming more confrontational. She said, But come on, Denzel. Look at what's happening in this country right now. Religious extremism, people using the Bible to justify discrimination, to deny women's rights, to attack LGBTQ people. Aren't you concerned about contributing to that? The temperature in the room began to rise. The other hosts sensed the conversation moving into dangerous territory, but none of them moved to redirect it. Denzel's voice remained controlled, but there was steel underneath the silk. He said, Joy, I'm concerned about extremism of any kind, but I'm not going to let extremists define my faith any more than I'd let political extremists define democracy. Joy leaned forward aggressively. She said, But isn't faith just a crutch for people who can't handle reality? Isn't it time we moved beyond these ancient superstitions and started dealing with the world as it actually is? That's when the atmosphere in the studio changed completely. Denzel's diplomatic facade began to crack. He said, A crutch? Joy, faith has been the foundation of every civil rights movement in American history. It sustained people through slavery, through Jim Crow, through every struggle for justice this country has ever seen. You call that a crutch? Joy doubled down, her voice taking on the mocking tone that had made her famous. She said, Those were different times, Denzel. We have science now. We have psychology. We have real solutions to problems. We don't need to pretend there's some invisible man in the sky controlling everything. The audience stirred uncomfortably. Several people looked genuinely offended by the dismissive characterization of faith. Denzel stood up slowly, his full presence suddenly dominating the space. He said, Invisible man in the sky? Joy, do you have any idea how insulting that is to millions of people? Joy remained seated, but her confidence was clearly shaken by his reaction. She said, I'm just being honest about what I believe. No. Denzel's voice cut through her response like a blade. You're not being honest. You're being condescending. You're mocking people's deepest beliefs for cheap laughs. He walked around the table, his movement deliberate and controlled, but charged with an energy that made everyone in the studio sit up straighter. You want to talk about reality, Joy? Let me tell you about reality. Reality is that faith-based organizations feed more hungry people, house more homeless individuals, and provide more addiction recovery services than any government program. Reality is that churches, synagogues, and mosques are often the only social safety net in underserved communities. His voice was rising now, not with anger, but with passionate conviction. Reality is that for millions of people, faith is what gets them through cancer diagnoses, through the loss of children, through poverty and despair, and circumstances you've never had to face from your comfortable position at this table. Joy tried to interrupt, clearly recognizing that she'd pushed too far. She said, Denzel, I didn't mean to offend. Yes, you did. Denzel's voice filled the studio. That's exactly what you meant to do. You meant to offend, to diminish, to mock. You brought me here to talk about my work, then turned it into an attack on my faith. The audience was completely silent, transfixed by the raw power of his response. Denzel continued, his voice carrying 40 years of experience dealing with people who thought they could tear down what he held sacred. You sit here every day making jokes about things other people consider holy. You think because you have a microphone and an audience, that gives you the right to mock what you don't understand. Whoopi tried to intervene, recognizing that this was spiraling beyond anyone's control. She said, "Denzel, maybe we should." "No, Whoopi." Denzel turned to include her in his response. "I'm tired of being told to be quiet when people attack my faith. I'm tired of being told to be respectful while others are being disrespectful." He faced Joy directly, the full force of his presence focused on her. "You want to know what's really destructive in this country, Joy? It's not faith. It's people like you who think that tolerance means everyone has to agree with you, that diversity means everyone has to think like you do." Joy's usual quick wit seemed to have abandoned her. She stammered, "I believe in tolerance." "No, you don't." Denzel's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You believe in tolerance for people who share your views. Anyone who believes in God, who finds strength in prayer, who sees meaning beyond the material world, they're fair game for your mockery." He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair, his movements decisive and final. "You know what I've learned in 40 years in this business? When people start attacking your faith, it's usually because they're threatened by something they see in you that they don't have themselves." As he put on his jacket, he delivered what would become his most quoted line from the exchange. "Faith isn't a crutch, Joy. Faith is what gives people the strength to carry others when they can't walk. But you wouldn't understand that because you've never carried anyone but yourself." The studio was electric with tension. Denzel's words had hit with the force of a physical blow. He walked toward the exit, then turned back for his final statement. "I came here to talk about a film that might inspire people, that might give them hope, that might help them believe in the possibility of redemption. Instead, I got lectured about how their deepest beliefs are primitive superstitions." His voice carried across the studio with absolute authority. "To everyone watching who has faith, don't let anyone tell you it's not real, not valid, not important. Don't let people like Joy convince you that believing in something greater than yourself makes you weak. It makes you strong." He looked directly at Joy one final time. "And Joy, the next time you want to mock someone's faith, maybe consider whether your skepticism has made you as happy, as fulfilled, as purposeful as their belief has made them. Because from where I'm standing, faith seems to be winning that comparison." The studio erupted as Denzel walked out with perfect dignity, leaving Joy visibly shaken and the other hosts scrambling to recover. Within minutes, the footage was everywhere. Social media exploded with reactions ranging from overwhelming support for Denzel to criticism of Joy's approach. Hashtag Denzel Defends Faith began trending worldwide. From his car, Denzel posted, "Faith has carried me through every challenge, every triumph, every moment of doubt. I'll never apologize for defending what gives millions of people hope and strength." The response was unprecedented. Religious leaders from all faiths praised his defense of belief. Fellow actors shared their own faith journeys. But most powerfully, ordinary people shared stories of how faith had sustained them through impossible circumstances. The revolution wasn't just in a celebrity defending religion. It was in someone refusing to let faith be dismissed as ignorance. It was in proving that belief and intelligence aren't mutually exclusive. It was in showing that sometimes the most important thing you can do is stand up for what you hold sacred. Denzel Washington didn't just lose it on The View that day. He found something more important than composure. He found the courage to defend what matters most, even when the cost was comfort, even when the audience was hostile, even when walking away was easier than standing firm. Because some things are worth more than television appearances. Some convictions are worth more than career considerations. And some beliefs are worth defending no matter who's attacking them. That day, Denzel Washington reminded everyone that faith isn't the absence of reason. It's the presence of hope. And hope, once defended, becomes unshakable.